Hello and welcome to Western Insights. Today's show is brought to you by Western's College of Business and Economics in partnership with the Western Alumni Association and Foundation. Our intention with Western Insights is to extend our expertise far beyond the classroom with our own internal subject matter experts and external guests. It's not a stretch to say that we're all drowning in data. It's collected everywhere and parked in everything from data warehouses to thumb drives. At the same time, we're engaged in discussion about what data should not be collected and by whom. The reality is the collection of data is not new, but the volume and speed of the collection has grown sharply, along with the ability to use the data. The field of data analytics helps make sense of data. It looks for patterns and trends and provides insights for organizations to make their own decisions. As with most things, where the science ends, the humans begin. That's where we're going to start today as we explore the field of data analytics from both the science aspect, but also from the ethics surrounding its use. To help us along the way today, we have joining us Allison Kurtzman, who is an accounting manager at the Weyerhaeuser Company. Over her career, she supported most of Weyerhaeuser's product lines and corporate accounting through mergers, divestitures, and pension strategy changes. All of these transactions flow through the general ledger, creating a large data set to be analyzed and data mined. She's played a key role in system integrations and rollout of new analysis and reporting tools, and is currently the lead liaison for her team's involvement in their new SAP system implementation project. Sachin Pai is the Director of Brand and Marketing Analytics at Masterclass, a leader in the EdTech space. For the last 20 years, Sachin has worked at several types of organizations, including IBM, Citigroup, Barclays Bank, Big Brothers Big Sisters, and AmeriCorps, to help solve issues and create value. He was a finalist for the 2016 Genius Awards in Marketing Analytics and holds a patent in a retargeting system for decision-making units. He's also a published author and has spoken at conferences about applying machine learning in programmatic media and advertising measurement. He graduated with a BA Economics and a minor in music from Brandeis University and an MBA from the Yale School of Management. Nate Vogel is Vice President, Worldwide Sales and Partner Enablement at Tableau. Nate's been building sales modules and developing sales trainings for over 30 years. He's interviewed over 10,000 individuals and conducted 2,500 recruiting sessions in more than 35 countries, accumulating more than 3 million miles in the air. His training experience encompasses all aspects of the cycle of selling. Nate joined Tableau in October of 2012 and is motivated to excel the new hire experience with his guidance and wisdom. His team consists of more than 60 enablement folks all over the globe that help with a 2-week onboarding bootcamp, leadership training, partner enablement, and global business change initiatives. Nate and the sales enablement team received Tableau's Founders Award in recognition for the outstanding delivery of world-class sales training and was recognized by LinkedIn as one of the best onboarding programs with Tableau. And we are proud to have Nate as an amazing Western alumni, so go Vikings. Moderating our discussion today is Donna Drum. Donna teaches accounting information systems and accounting analytics here at Western and had a successful career in IT before she started teaching. She's published several teaching cases and papers on the subject of analytics for accountants and is a bit of a cheerleader for infusing practical analytics into as many places as possible, both in the classroom and in the workplace. A little housekeeping before we dive in today. Closed captioning is available for this event. Using Zoom, you may activate this feature at any time through the closed captioning button in your menu bar. Some of you have submitted questions with your registration, and we do really always appreciate seeing those ahead of time. If you have additional questions today, which we're pretty sure you will, please feel free to use that Zoom Q&A feature, which is also found in your Zoom menu bar. We'll be responding to questions throughout the discussion today, so don't be shy. Okay, Donna, let's dive in.
Thank you, James. And thank you to my amazing speakers. Our speakers today are going to offer a wide variety of perspectives and examples, but keep in mind, every organization is different. What one firm found was a huge advantage might not work for another. So our goal today is to help you understand that big data doesn't have to be an overwhelming undertaking. Start with small, manageable activities where you think your business can use some insight. The key is to understand your own organization or industry and then hunt down the data that's going to help you make some improvements. So let's start with Nate. Can you please give us a simple definition of data analytics? It's a term we hear all the time, but what does it actually mean?
You bet. Hopefully you can hear me well. First, I just want to say go Vikings. So honored that I went to Western, and anytime I have a chance to come back and speak, I always want to do that. So, but Specifically, data analytics, I think about that, just basically making and understanding data. It comprises of sometimes tools, techniques, process, but just keep it really simple, just understanding analytics through data.
Thank you. Allison, what would you like to add to that from your experience at Weyerhaeuser?
Yes, I think in accounting at a Fortune 500 company, we're really mass consumers of data. Every dollar that the company makes flows through the general ledger somehow. And that starts as one line item, which is every invoice, every PO, every payroll. That's overwhelming. And it's not really helpful at that point because you're just looking at lines to the point where your eyes go blurry, right? So analytics turn that into a story that we can actually use to describe what our historical trends are, why do these results match or not match what we expected, and help to inform future decisions that we're going to make for the business. And then, accounting's my area of expertise, but a large company is going to have endless data points on really everything. So for Weyerhaeuser, the land we own, machinery, production, supply chain, market, all that stuff you can analyze and put into layers to really make sense of what's going on around you and help to inform what you do next.
Okay, thank you. And Sachin, what would you like to add to our definition of data analytics to get us going?
I would just follow on what Allison said. I think as being in the analytics role, our job is to be storytellers. So look at the data and understand really what the trends, what the data is suggesting, so that we can provide insights to like the right decision makers to the business on what actions should we take, how we should optimize, how should we change things around. There's so much value in this data, and our job is to understand it and share that with the broader company.
Okay, thank you. So to summarize, we have a huge volume of data, and there are a wide variety of tools and techniques, but what it boils down to is helping us tell the story of our business. Okay, so Sachin, let's come back to you. Where's all this data coming from? In other words, what changed? How did we get here?
Yeah, I just looked up right before this meeting, something like 90% of the data we have today has been collected in like the last 2 years. So every aspect of our lives is being tracked, for better or for worse. Like, for example, our watch, my phone, like even my thermostat in my house is generating data. And what brands and companies are doing is trying to better understand and quantify how people behave, so that we can make better decisions on when to turn the heat or turn the up or down, when to put the blue screen on, or I forget, whatever it is on the phone, to like dim the screen on the phone. For the most part, it's good, right? Companies are trying to make our lives better through data. Sometimes there's some nefarious actors in there, but I think for the most part, companies and brands want to use our data to help make our lives better. But yeah, a lot of data being generated, and every aspect is being digitized and captured.
Okay, so Nate, what would you like to add to that? Where is, what's your perspective on where all this data is coming from?
Yeah, that's kind of the nice point of Tableau, and there's other great companies out there that do the same thing. But if you're not familiar with Tableau, we help people see and understand data. There's a lot of data out there. Magazines, Forbes, Fortune's calling data is the new oil. Companies are trying to understand it. As Sachin said, there's just so much data coming in all over the place. So how do you make sense of it? How do you analyze it? How do you, from an intern to a CEO, understand it? And 6, 7, 8, 9 years ago when I started at Tableau, it wasn't as popular to really, every single person be able to understand data. Typically you had, an analytics background, or you're an analyst, but now all of us, even from my 9-year-old, learning how to understand data and make decisions around that is so important. And companies are trying to figure this out, especially with so much data coming in, data sets, data connectors. And that's really where Tableau comes in. But the mission is more important, which is just really making sure that people understand it and can make sense of it, make some intelligent decisions around it.
I would just like to add on to Nate's point, is that like historically, like data analytics is like a new function within companies. And historically it's been limited to just data analytics. But in the future, it's not going to be just data analysts looking at data. Everyone will be required to understand data, how it works, and pull their own data, right? So like right now there are dedicated teams, but even today, like you see marketers, like who I mainly work with, they're more fluent in data, understand it, and then they can tell their own stories. So the data analytics function as a standalone business, or like specializing just pulling data, that won't be, my belief is it won't be like a specialized skill set. It'll be throughout the company.
Yep, I agree.
Interesting. Okay, thank you. So Allison, we're talking about just how much data is available and where that's coming from. But that doesn't mean, right, more data doesn't mean better data or better decisions. So how do you make that data a little less overwhelming?
So I think for me, a lot of it is just trying to clarify at the beginning, what's my goal? What's my scope? So starting with a little bit more of a top-down approach, I guess. That's kind of how my brain is wrapped around it. I don't always have to have this full data set or start from the bottom of, okay, I have 15,000 lines. What is the trend of all of these lines? Do I have any ideas or hunches? Can I look at a subset? Can I start with a big category and dig down? We have a lot of hierarchies built in that allow us to do that. And thinking, who's my audience? If I'm rounding to the millions for third-party reporting or for VPs and I'm presenting them $1,000 invoices, their eyes are going to bug out. So, but I could be talking to a local team where that stuff is going to matter. So just getting that scoping right. And then when I'm done, just because I'm starting at that top level, making sure I don't just stop with the first compelling story that I find. I was in a statistics class in college and we did a survey at the beginning of the class with all these random questions. And our final was try to make a hypothesis and prove something out. And no joke, I had a correlation that I found between the temperature at the time of birth because of birth date and city and the sex that you were assigned at birth. And we all know that's ridiculous, right? So you can go down a wrong path. So for me, it's if you think you're onto something, use some common sense, check some of the things you might have filtered out, or collaborate and run by other teams, because so many people are looking at data now and we are all analyzing it in different ways in our own different flavors. Talk to somebody in another department, run that by them and see, are you onto something? Is it something that makes no sense? We're having conversations about data now because we're all looking at it with our own viewpoints. So that comes to, you end up with more powerful and better decisions that way by making sure that you're fact checking what you're looking at and running it by some different perspectives.
Allison,
And I'm feeling so validated right now because that's how I teach it, right? What is your goal? How are you going to get there? Figure out what your audience actually needs, right? Like you said, CEOs are very different than people who want to see, $1,000 invoices and that level of detail. I'm sorry, Nate, I cut you off. Go ahead.
No, not at all. I was just going to say, Allison, we try to promote that at Tableau. We kind of say 10 eyes are better than 2 eyes on something. I mean, there's one opportunity to get insight and data, make sense of it. But I do think collaborating, and for all the folks listening, that is probably the most important skill set. When Salesforce actually acquired Tableau a few years ago, I found that the collaboration skill is so important, because as you're looking at data and you're getting insights, not only for maybe you and your team, but being able to share that with other peers within your company or a broader company is huge. And then I think you can make some hypothesis. Sometimes the data set's wrong. Maybe you have the data is not clean and someone catches that because they're not as familiar with it per se. And they kind of just start asking questions and you go, oh man, I missed that. And so I think the power of collaboration and making sure that you get a lot of eyes on it is really important. Well, good comment there.
Okay, Sachin, would you like to add something to that? Either, how do we make the data less overwhelming?
Yeah, I think like one job of the analyst is storytelling, right? But there's also understanding there's a lot of noise in the data, right? And like we hear in analytics, like signal versus noise. There's so much noise, like everything's being tracked, and there's so much information, which is like overwhelming to several teams. But our job as analysts, right, is to understand what the signal is. What is the true thing we're trying to understand and drill down on that so that we can find the insight and share with the business and make a right decision. So looking through the noise, just like looking for that storyline. And that's a lot about what we do.
Okay. I'm going to take our first audience question and we'll start with Nate on this one. Because again, talking about how to deal with all of this, what are the biggest pitfalls or rookie mistakes you see when businesses are using data to inform decisions?
Yeah, I will first call out all students out there. Don't forget Tableau's for free for students. So make sure you go down there and download it. You can use it. And it is a really important skill set, not just Tableau, but just having analytics and being able to actually understand it is so important. So number one pitfalls is probably, I'm seeing some new employees join the workforce that don't have a skill set or understand really what data and analytics. No matter what industry you go into, the data is going to be center on that. Number two, I said it earlier, but just is the data clean? Sometimes we make decisions on data, and it's so important that you have the opportunity to not only look at the data but ask questions, be skeptical. Don't be afraid to be, that's the whole point. We want to hear everyone's opinion. And I think just having clean data is super important. We're seeing that before you really analyze data, you have to actually make sure it's clean or prep. And Allison said earlier, communication. You've got to then be clear on the hypothesis that you have, the insights you have, and then share and communicate, but also be open for feedback. So it doesn't necessarily mean that what your opinion is completely right. But I think that communication element, I've seen a miss on pitfalls. In other words, they see the data, they make the decisions on that, they don't socialize it, they don't double check that the data is clean, and potentially might have missed an important decision on those process.
Okay, I want to stop there for a second. We've used the term clean data a couple times now, and because we want to make sure people understand where we're coming from. When we're talking about, dirty data, messy data, we're talking about sometimes simple things like multiple names for the same vendor, right? Did you spell Tableau wrong? 5 different ways, right? That's messy data. We're also talking about things that can't happen. Temperatures, right? When we're talking, because Allison mentioned temperatures, something that's way outside the range of a temperature that we could experience here on Earth. But it's obviously, more subtle things, and we need to make sure that our data is clean for the purposes that we're using it for. So let's go back to Sachin. What about what rookie mistakes and pitfalls have you seen?
It's not even rookie, like even me, 20 years in this industry I'm still going through it, right? One is data cleansing. I agree with Nate. It's such an important part of the process, right? So like when we go into like advanced modeling, about 80% of our work is around the data cleansing part. And I can't stress how important that is. We're never gonna have perfect data. And to make sure your data set is clean, I think it's really important. So I can't even overemphasize that. The other aspect is, it may be weird coming from a data person, but like the data is we're like the output of the data, the insight may not be 100% correct, right? Like the statistical techniques or the models you use are always going to be biased, and it's going to have some limitations. We don't know everything that's happening in the world. We're just modeling what we have access to. So recognizing that our models aren't going to be perfect and being humble in that, right? And be like, we're missing something, but when the data is showing this is whatever ABC is occurring, but recognizing there's some limitations on what the data can do and what the story can tell. So I think that's a really important part, to recognize we can only do so much with the data that we have access to. And the last part, again, it's not even a rookie thing. I think people at all levels face it, is that storytelling that Nate was talking about. Storytelling, communication is so critical, right? Because you want to be able to tell the story to the right level so that they're able to take the action. So like from a modeling side, you don't need to tell them the coefficients or the like really specific things about the model. You need to know what the audience wants to hear so they can make the right decision. So I 100% agree with Nate's process. Data cleansing, understanding limitations, and also storytelling.
Okay, so Allison's having some audio issues, so we'll come back to her. I want to hear about your favorite tools now. What tools do you use for your analysis, and how do you decide when to use them? Nate, let's go back to you. I bet I can guess one tool that you use.
That's right. Yeah, Tableau for sure. So kind of period. Tableau Public, another free asset, trying to just share really cool part. You can just look it up and you can see workbooks and from writers to thought leaders using data of all sets. My wife and I were talking about the immunization of the mumps, measles, and some of the schools, and how many schools have actually kind of tracked data around some of these immunizations. So, and we just went on Tableau Public, typed it up, and all these cool visualizations, we call them vizzes at Tableau, came up, and you could really see thought leaders and see what their insights, and just like Sachin said, the story, like what is the story? And we kind of double clicked into a specific area and really had a rich discussion as a couple about kind of what our beliefs are. So Tableau is great. There's also some killer, just incredible tools out there that are doing some work with artificial intelligence. I'm a big fan of Gong, good friend and mentor, just joined the board. So I'm starting to look a little more at them. They help with sales intelligence, revenue intelligence. So basically insights. So sales teams can have data-driven decisions on how they collaborate with customers and ultimately serve them well. There's also some really cool companies that are doing collaboration, like Airtable, a really cool company that helps companies collaborate better in each department. So, but of course, these are all things that are companies that are using data to provide good insights to make good decisions. I got a bunch more, but I'll make sure to kind of hit some of the big ones.
Well, and if you would please send them to us,
Okay,
send us
sure.
an email, and then we'll send it out to all the participants, because
bet.
they are, all of these resources, just a wealth of information here from my panelists. Sachin, let's talk about your favorite tools, and then we'll check in with Allison and see how our audio is doing.
Yeah, definitely. I think of analytics in a few different stages, like the descriptive, which is more about what the data is showing historically, then like the modeling, so the predictive and prescriptive side. On the descriptive side, which is like just sharing data, yeah, I think Tableau is a great tool. There are other tools, but it's really just being able to democratize data and give access to the whole company, what's happening in the business. And I think that's a key part of the transformation of business, right? Everyone have access to data. So it's not, the conversations are symmetrical, right? It's not just one team knows everything and just reading out, right? So I urge my teams to always, we don't want to be reporters, right? The conversation be two ways. Like, everyone should know the data, and let's have an educated conversation. So democratizing data through tools like Tableau, Looker, I think Google has a product, but everyone should have access to data. Then for analysis, the SQL is like a language, but it allows us to pull data, extract data out of databases. R and Python are for like more advanced stuff, but like simple Excel, Google Sheets allows us to like do some pretty good analyses. So like they're free, right? You don't have to pay for them, but it's easy to learn. At least Excel and Google. R and Python is a little more sophisticated, more advanced, but like I mentioned before, this is where the industry is going, so it may be helpful to learn those tools as well.
Okay, yep, and I want to clarify what Sachin is saying there. The letter R.
The letter R.
That's
yeah.
The letter R. Yep, that's the name of a programming language, if you want to call it that. And Python is another. They are open access tools, and so there is a ton of resources out there to help you learn those on your own. If you think that this is a direction you might want to go, just try some of those. Okay. Allison, are you back with us?
I am back, I believe. Can you hear me?
Woo-hoo!
I had some big audio issues there. I don't know what was happening, but I should be back in business. Sorry about that.
No, that's perfectly fine. Technology happens. You sound great. So let's talk about your favorite tools.
Yeah, so as an accountant, I guess old habits die hard. I use Excel a lot, but we've had a lot of different changes in how Excel can interact with data. So the biggest change for me has been having data cubes available. And so being able to connect directly into a data cube of our ledger or a slice of our ledger. It's not just dollars data though. So when I worked in benefits accounting, I had workbooks where I'd pull in HR employee data, I'd pull stuff from the ledger, I'd pull things from our production systems to see hourly employee hours and all that stuff. So you can put all those things together and have one cohesive package of all these different data sets and slices, whereas before it would have been dump this into Excel table, VLOOKUP, concatenate, whatever formula stuff you're going to do to put it together. Now it's just at your fingertips. So a lot of that stuff is super easy with pivot tables. You can go and just have a pivot table version of a data source and drag and drop and whatever. We've been using a lot of cubes workbooks too. Several people are experts in write a cube set formula to pull exactly what you want. So that changed a lot of stuff for us. Is even our old tool of Excel didn't used to have a lot of capability, now has so much more built in. So if you're using it, you can get just about anything in.
Well, and I think that answers one of the questions that I wanted to ask you about as well. Weyerhaeuser has made a huge investment in data analytics. What was the trigger? What caused that?
A lot of this was going on before I joined. So for me, that was something that was really attractive to me. And part of it, I think, is natural to our culture. I mean, we've been growing trees and trying to find ways that we could do that better and better, which requires data about the trees, what over the lifespan of the trees is making them do better, and applying that to your next generation. So it seems like that mindset isn't something in our production. It's all throughout all of our different teams. So when I was doing interviews and I heard, this is not a team of spreadsheet jockeys, this is a team where you're going to be challenged to go meet your business partners and sit down with them and talk about the data that you're seeing and bring ideas to the table and play with it and see what you come up with. You're not going to go too far off the rails. You're not going to break anything. Just get creative and see what happens. And I see that through all different levels of our organization. We've continued to get more and more tools to be able to look at things better. And I think it's because we have a culture of curious people who just want to look at things. And I don't know if that's unique to Weyerhaeuser. I feel like that's a lot of places because people are just naturally curious and want to see patterns and want to understand the story. But a lot of it just happened organically. It wasn't that we said, oh, let's apply data analytics to this particular idea or challenge. It was, why it is like this. Let's talk to this person. Oh, they have this cool data set over here. Pull that into my stuff. Do these match up? Oh, it looks like I have a trend here. Just being curious and collaborating with people kind of naturally spun up a lot of what we have today.
And that's what I was talking about a little bit in the introduction as well, that it doesn't have to be a huge, overwhelming project. Look at what you do have. Talk to people, ask people questions, ask smart people dumb questions, right? To quote one of my favorite podcasts. And then these things can just kind of happen organically. I want to shift gears a little bit. We're getting a lot of audience questions, and I'm going to start with Sachin. Let's talk about the hazards of data analytics. People tend to have this mindset that if we're using data for decision making, our answer should be 100% correct and unbiased. Sachin, let's start with you. Is that true? Is there bias in data? It's numbers, right?
There's no bias in data. There's bias in analysis. So the good analyst and a good data person is understanding how the best way to interpret the data. We can always you can on purpose bias the data if you want to tell a specific story, or you can let the data come out in its natural way. But yeah, there's going to be a bias, and it's tricky to figure out how to tell the story in the most objective way as possible. Yeah, it's a hard question. Yeah, so it is challenging.
It's a very hard question. Nate, what would you like to add to that?
Yeah, I think it's just having time, putting time in a calendar, or we surely try to do this on our enablement team, to really have time to banter. That's a word we use on our own sales enablement team. And that's a more positive way to argue. So we call it banter. But the reality is, let's show the data, or a problem we're trying to solve, or solution that we're trying to work together. And then 20, 25 minutes, we literally as a team say, let's banter. What do you think? And get everyone's opinion. I think it's such a hard thing, and something I'm personally trying to work on as a leader. We want to hear from everyone. Sometimes the loudest people in the room are not necessarily the correct ones. They might be the most passionate ones. But if you have the opportunity, that's where I think the bias part helps, when you can just get everyone's opinion and have time to disagree and banter. That's the beautiful thing about, and we surely did this when I was in college too, maybe or a few drinks helped, but it's such an important skill set. So we work on bias by making sure when we have meetings, we have time to really look at the data, really have some good discussions, hear everyone's opinion. It's okay to disagree. And then after the meeting, or right before we close the meeting, then we agree as a team, okay, here's a decision we made, and we're all gonna be aligned with that. But I found that that's been a really good best practice, and something that we now really enjoy as a team. It's fun to hear what people think and what their thoughts are. And we found that to be a really positive work environment.
Okay.
I
What
agree
about,
with,
sorry, go
if I
ahead.
just follow
Sachin.
on to Nate's comment, I think the data analysis process is iterative, right? It's not like the data team finishes is done. I think conversation is so important to uncover things that we may have missed or forgotten. Yeah, just kind of getting the more feedback and making an iterative process is crucial for a good analysis. So I agree.
Okay. I'm getting some questions about, in a broader sense, how Do you know of what steps are being taken to remove social or demographic bias from the modeling of data analytics and AI? Is there something that can be addressed through a software solution? And then related to that, another question, it was said that there's no bias in data. What about created data sets from various machine learning? Are there instances where data can be connected that leaves out important perspectives? That's a deep question. I'll leave that one open. Who would like to start that one?
I can hit it. I think one thing that's really cool we did at Tableau is we created a COVID data hub, and that was cross-functional through some of our incredible solution engineers here at Tableau, our customers, our partners, and we created data sets with, early on COVID-19. You can, still available today. That wasn't easy. That was challenging, and I agree with the question from the audience. You can have bias with wrong data sets. You can, if you exclude, let's say, a geography, then that will tremendously affect your data. And that's the point I think all three of us as panelists get passionate about, is making sure that you have some time to really make sure before you go into heavy analysis that you do as best you can to make sure the data is clean or accurate. That could be in a discovery element. And then you can ask some discussions. Wait a minute, I'm seeing that part of, the data is missing some geographies or some zip codes, and why was that done? What, let's add it in and let's see what if the data changes. So I think it's super important. I always believe in positive intent. So potentially there was something that was left out for a reason, but I do think it does affect, my 9-year-old understands, 2 + 2 should equal 4, right? And so if it doesn't, there's something messed up. And then we talk about it and have discovery on it. So that doesn't change. And I think that's super important. And I think that's the goal of all of us, listening, and companies to really make sure that we're as ethical about what we're trying to showcase and data. Because now we know that people are going to make decisions on it. They're going to have some insights from it, and companies will make decisions on it. And it's super important. You can tell I'm passionate about this. So Satya, maybe Allison, I'll have you. Who's next?
Sachin, would you like to jump on that one?
No, I agree with Nate's response. It's like a tricky area that we need to address as an industry. I think predominantly analysts and people are trying to do good with the data and trying their best to make good decisions. But we just don't know everything, and we make mistakes, right? And we forget things or don't include things properly. But yeah, it's a complicated question, and we probably spend hours discussing this and how to do better. But I think people are trying to do better and trying to do right.
Okay, thank you. Allison, I want to come back to you. We have another question from an audience member that relates to something that you had talked about as well. You talked about your statistics course and building a hypothesis. Have you ever built a hypothesis, and how did you test it? Did you run experiments on your business data?
I mean, there's definitely things where if you're seeing, I kind of tend to approach things like that. If I'm looking at a report or something like that, say we're closing the books and I want to make sure things are looking good before I give that thumbs up, yep, we're closed, and something looks strange, I'm going to go, probably just because of my mind works with some sort of a hunch of, okay, what could possibly cause that? Well, I think it's this type of thing, and then go look for it. And if I fit, well, yeah, my hypothesis is right, I found what I'm looking for. It doesn't always work like that. You can definitely think you're going in the right direction, and then something that's entirely different that stands out at you, or get stuck and need to get else's perspective on what am I possibly missing, because X, Y, and Z all look like I would expect. Could it be something different? So I try to approach things. Maybe that's just how my is wired a little bit, of an idea, come up with an approach, and then test it out and see if it works. And once I feel comfortable of seeing if it works or what I expect, my last step's always to talk to other folks about it. I think we are continually bringing up through this this conversation that collaboration piece, and that having someone poke holes in it or getting that other feedback from is very, very important to make driving at the right place. You don't have any blind spots what you're doing, you're not seeing anything, you've got the full picture and you're onto something.
Okay. So we keep coming back to the collaboration idea. whether we're talking about potential bias, whether we're talking about just making sure the data is right before we send out our reports. The collaboration seems to be a key thing, which I don't think comes up often enough. Telling that story, how do we communicate? How do we make sure that things are correct? So I'm going to go to, we have such good audience questions this time. I'm going to go back to another audience question. Big data can have a bad name along the lines of Big Brother. How do you feel about your jobs sliding into that kind of issue? Who would like to take that one?
I'll go
Any
first.
thoughts on that?
When I
Okay, go ahead,
first-
Sachin.
So like I spend most of my time in digital media, and I think that's where digital media and advertising has gotten really a bad name. When I first started in this, right, it was like the Wild West. Like we could track everything, and we could track almost everything, and it was completely unregulated. So as a person, like I was scared, I didn't like it, I didn't want that. But as a brand, like we love the ability to serve the right ad to the right person at the right time. That's like every brand's goal. But it was intrusion into privacy, right? And I don't think it was accurate. But over the last few years, GDPR, which is a EU regulation. I'm not sure what it stands for. CCPA, which is a California regulation. These new, from a government perspective, have applied new policies to limit how much access we have in our data. Even just this week, Apple launched their new iOS platform 14.5, which is like if you people that have an iPhone and have downloaded this new update, you'll see I think there's a request that says, well, are you allowed to track my data? Or I forget the exact language is. But that itself is now businesses, the private sector has taken upon themselves to limit privacy, limit sharing of data. Google next year is going to make a cookieless Chrome browser, which again is cookies, how we track behavior. They're going to make a cookieless browser. So I think the industry has recognized that people don't like this, right? And they don't want to be sharing data as much, knowingly or unknowingly. And it's the right thing to do. So I think people are pulling, large institutions like government and private corporations are pulling back on how much data is being shared across the board. So I think we're heading in the right direction there.
Okay. Nate, what would you like to add to that? Oh, I'm sorry.
Conversely, brands are really
Wait.
nervous. The opposite side, brands and advertisers are really nervous because now we have less signal to make a decision. So there is the downside. That's
Well, Sachin, I was going to go kind of bridge your comment. I think it's a great comment. This is where I'm curious and surely not educated like I should be. Machine learning, artificial intelligence, predictions, right? Where you can use data and take a snippet of data, get insight on that data, and potentially have some decisions around it. This is where AI, I'm fascinated. And so, again, I think we're doing a nice job, but there's just some incredible companies out there that are using artificial intelligence to actually analyze a certain part of data and then come back. Doesn't necessarily mean it's the truth, but boy, it sure gives you a good perspective on and making decisions around artificial intelligence, machine learning, understanding what predictions are. And I'm always fascinated by it because I'm like, okay, that gives a summary. And then to our earlier conversation, then I still think it's important to have your own analysts and analysis, some collaboration and so on. But this is where I do think, because I agree, I think it's so important that we want to make sure whatever work, we surely don't want to be, big brother. We want to make sure whatever data we have, we can make sense of it, make some decisions around that, and make sure that organizations, companies are okay with it. A lot of times I like when companies say, yeah, are you okay with it? And I can either say yes or no on sharing the data or not. But this is where I do believe AI and some other really cool concepts, I think can really help us be better with data and make some really good decisions around it. So Sachin, I kind of went a little different angle, and I know you're more of an expert on these topics than me, but I think this is definitely the wave of the future.
Allison, would you like to chime in on that? I know that the corporate perspective on that is very different. What would you like to add?
I mean, with a lot of the things that I'm using, I can say I use big data, but it's not necessarily big brothery type data on people and decisions. But I know, there's other aspects of the business that are maybe thinking of that. I can't really speak on that. But big data doesn't always necessarily have to mean, oh, it's because of what you're tracking. It's all of the different little insights and snippets that you can have from every single facet of any business. That could be, the people data could be a part of it, but it could also be, like I was saying earlier, production hours or anything that really you could analyze to draw insights on a business and make a decision. So it's not necessarily what you always hear about in the media, although that is a very important piece. And even with, employee data and things like that, keeping that stuff confidential is incredibly important. And I spent a lot of time in benefits accounting where, yes, we had to think about that a lot, but big data can also be anything that you could collect and put together and aggregate to make decisions. And that's mostly what I'm working with. So.
Okay, thank you. Just reading some of the questions about cookies. Could we talk a little bit about cookies and what that is?
So I'm not.
I think
Yeah.
I think people have a general sense, but yeah, Sachin, you were the one that made that comment. What does that mean? And I can give an example too.
Yeah. So I'm not necessarily a technical person, so hopefully maybe Donna, you can kind of explain. So when you open up your browser, right, if it's Google Chrome or whatever, your web browser, and you visit a web page, that company is going to drop a 1x1 pixel on your browser, right? Which essentially identifies to them or identifies that you have visited their web page. And what that provides is a signal to all these intermediary companies that Donna, for example, or not Donna, is person ABC, because it's anonymized, has visited western.edu. And what's done off that is all these models are built to identify who Donna or person ABC is and what her interests are. And with that, we start doing modeling and be like, okay, she probably works at a university. She might live in Bellingham. What kind of interests may she have? She probably likes the outdoors. And then brands can start selling her, like REI can target her, be like, hey, I want someone who's interested in outdoor equipment, lives in an outdoor area, let's sell her a kayak. So that one visit to even Western, right, can generate all this information. And it's not just one visit, it's all these things combined. It's where you live, the geolocation, your phone, stitching together all these first-party and third-party data sets together to help build who Donna is. It's all based on that one cookie. Yeah, it sounds kind of creepy, but this is how marketing works. Yeah, that makes sense, Donna?
I agree, and it does. That was a good example. And in this session, we're not looking for the extremely detailed technical explanations of how things work. So for instance, I've had conversations with people that are convinced that their computer is listening to them because, like, for an example, I recently bought this ring. Okay, I bought it from a company named Silpada. And now on CNN, in my emails, these ads for Silpada will show up, and specifically this ring and a couple others that I looked at. That's what the cookies do, right? So they are looking at your computer and saying, oh, okay, you were recently at Silpada, but now you're on CNN. I'm going to show you an ad for more Silpada things. Yeah, so that's where we get into this idea of it being very intrusive.
Agreed. And not only that, you visited Silpada, but now the ring adjacent companies, so let's say luxury items, they also will start targeting you. So you'll get perfume ads, you'll get a handbag ad. So now everyone knows that you're into buying rings. What else can we sell to you? So this is where, the intrusiveness happens.
Yes. And personally, it drives me crazy, but I'm not a marketer. So we are getting down to the end. I did have a question that I really liked. What is the worst blunder that any of you have seen? Let's start with Allison. What is the worst data analytics blunder that you've seen? And obviously you can't share information. You work for a publicly traded company, but is there something that you could share as sort of a cautionary tale?
I made a really silly assumption one time, and I'll go with the personal one because it's something I did as an entry-level accountant. I made a really silly assumption that we had some codes in our system that I thought would denote states, and because they were like letters of states. No, that's not what it was at all. It could totally blur lines. It was regional. And so I told project, spent a month doing it. assuming that these things were states. And it's that I didn't know. And then it was something where I was going to go present it to people and say, here's, it wasn't like a decision or anything. It was, I need to take these assets and do something with them in the system to update them. It wasn't states. I was totally wrong. I sent everything to the wrong person. And it's all because I made some assumption at the beginning of, well, this looks like it should make sense, right? I just misjudged the data and I didn't talk to anybody about it. I didn't ask anybody that question. I just kind of ran with it. So it ended up not being a big deal. I redid it with the correct ones. We got everything done we needed to do. It wasn't a big deal. Everybody was happy. But yeah, it's going into something you've got to make sure you're looking at the right thing. And if that requires talking to people, if that requires kind of poking in what you're doing, that is worth it every single time. Because you feel kind of silly when you send that out, like, oh gosh, what do you mean this isn't state?
That is a great life lesson. So you have to understand the data.
Yeah.
Right. We call these things data dictionaries, right? Where it talks about this is what's in this field. And if Allison had a good data dictionary, she wouldn't have thought that that was a state field. And so understand the data, but collaborate.
Mhm.
Okay. Sachin, what would you like to add? Do you have a cautionary tale or a funny one?
I'm gonna take the question a different way. Like even being in this field for a long time, I still make mistakes. I think it's important, and I ask this in interviews all the time, is like, what do we learn from the mistake and how can we do better next time? I think it's okay. Like we're learning, we're always trying out new things, but when we recognize the mistake, how can we make our jobs, how can we not make those mistakes in the future, and how can we do better next time? I can't think of a specific example. I unfortunately do make a lot of mistakes, but I just know I need to grow from them.
Okay. Great answer. Thank you. How about you, Nate?
Yeah, I'll probably say the similar thing. Allison, I made the same mistake, and I saw one of the chat Q&A. Roxanne, I think, said, all data has some sort of bias. I agree. I mean, you do have to check. And I made, early on when I joined Tableau, I just didn't take enough time to just quickly check the data set, and I made some incredible thought-provoking, analysis, and then everyone was like, "Wow, that was great." And then I left the meeting, I went back, and I'm like, "Oh shit, that." Data was wrong. So I mean, and I agree. I think it's something you just got to, even been in the space a long time, you've got to just stick to the basics and do some of that. And I'll kind of say the similar thing in a sense that I think some of the mistakes I've made too is just not be curious enough. Allison, you said it too. Like, I think we're all curious. I think I'm curious if I have time to be curious, and sometimes I'm moving so fast that I should take more time to just really think through, not only is the data clean and, data sets and so on, but just really having a chance to think about analytics and analysis and make some good decisions around it. And that sometimes has been the mistake. I haven't asked the questions that I should have, or didn't have enough knowledge. Sometimes it's okay to say, I don't know. And the older I get, that's actually a better answer. Let me research, let me come back to you. Let me go ask someone that's an expert and come back to you. And I think that's something that I think that's a pitfall. It's something I've made mistakes on, and I'm still doing that. So I'm trying to continue to do that as a personal leader and a practice that I'm working on every day.
Yeah, I agree. And that goes back to Allison's point about being kind of a newbie data analyst, right? She didn't ask the questions because she felt uncomfortable. And then back to Sachin's point too, I think that with anything, we need to just take a moment, take a deep breath, and think about what we're doing, right? We should start with our goal and our audience, and how do we make sure, like Allison said, she was a month into this project. Are we still working towards meeting the right goal for our audience, or have we gotten so far down into the weeds?
I think the other thing I've learned too over my career is checking. Is checking in as you're going along too. Don't get so far down one path or one, building one data model or something without asking those questions or running it by somebody, or even just stepping back and running something else through it, so that you can test it. Don't get all the way to the end, and then figure out that you're wrong. Figure out you're wrong on like step 2. That's a lot easier to do and a lot easier to course correct. And there's nothing wrong with being wrong. You've learned something about your process. You've learned that there is a gap, you've learned that the direction you were going isn't correct. That's never a bad thing. That's only going to get you to a better spot at the end of the day.
I'll just
Okay,
want to
we
add
have
on to that
3
real quick.
minutes left. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Sachin.
I just wanted to add on to that. Yeah, there's nothing wrong with being wrong. I think a lot of new companies are saying fail, but fail fast and do better, right? So don't hold on to an idea for a long time just because it was your idea and stick with it. I think fail, learn that you failed, and how do you course correct from there? So I think that's really important. Like test out new things, try out new things, learn from it, and make a better decision.
That is spectacular, Sachin, and that's what I was actually going to note. We have 3-ish minutes left. And so my question to everybody was going to be, what thoughts would you like to share? What words of encouragement do you have? So that was perfect. Would you like to add on to that before I move on to somebody else for their final thoughts?
Yeah, I think, yeah, fail fast, but learn from it. And I think Nate brought up before, just like be curious, especially in this data stage, in this data world, like new developments are happening all the time. You need to have some like self-motivation to learn the new techniques, new tools, new understanding of what's happening if you really want to be successful in data world and really in the entire world, right? I think this applies to everything, is just be curious and be open to learning new ideas and new approaches.
Okay, thank you. Nate, final thoughts?
Yeah, plus
1
one
minute.
on that. Allison also said some really wise thoughts there. I'll just say keep collaborating. I mean, I truly believe the world is a better place with data-driven decisions. That's why I'm, no matter if I'm at Tableau or some other company, I'm going to be involved with some type of data and some type of insights, because I think it's something that I'm really proud of. And collaborate, banter, be able to work as a team and be. And I'm saying this to everyone, but I'm also saying it to myself. Get everyone's opinion. Every person has an opinion, and if you can work to get insights from everyone, you'll make a better decision. And hopefully that decision is with data, of course.
All right. Allison, final
Yeah.
thoughts, 1 minute.
Yep. All right. Yeah, I think that for me, what's been so exciting about being able to get so much of the manual work out of accounting and really just get into those the data analytics and have conversations with different people across the business that are looking at the same data with their own perspectives is really feeling like you're more of an ally and a decision maker, and you have a valuable seat at the table on what you're going to do at the company, not just saying I'm going into accounting, I'm going to go put some stuff in my calculator, and then I'm going to go not talk to anybody. We are all the time, everything touches the ledger. We are talking to people throughout the company all the time, getting all kinds of perspectives. And that's exciting. That's really what I come to work for. That's what I enjoy. So that collaboration, that being open to different perspectives, saying something and knowing that, okay, I might not say this perfectly, I could be wrong. And that's okay, because all I'm going to find out by being wrong is I found out where the boundary is. To know where the boundary truly is, you kind of have to go past it sometimes and then dial back. Otherwise, you're never going to quite get there. And that's okay. And I think being in an environment, and a lot of companies are, the warehouse are definitely where it's safe to have those conversations, and no one's going to say, oh, you said something a little wrong or you had a silly idea. Not at all. You could be onto something with that. So speak up and say it.
Wonderful. Thank you all so much. So let's summarize a minute here, because I think we said some things that people who had tuned into this might not have been expecting. Data analytics isn't just about the data. Number one, yes, you have to make sure that you have clean data and that you understand what the data is. But what I have heard from all 3 of our spectacular guests is collaborate, be curious, ask questions, and then communicate. Thank you all so much for being here. James, I'll turn it back to you.
This was an amazing discussion. Thank you, all of you. This was, everyone's schedules, like COVID has taken all of our schedules and multiplied by 4. So I really do appreciate your time here today with us. And for those of you in our audience, thank you for joining us today for Western Insights. From all of us at Western Washington University and the College of Business and Economics, we really want to thank you for joining us today. We also want to thank the Western Alumni Association and the Western Foundation for all of their support for this series. And we know that they would like us to thank all of you who chose to financially support the university as part of this effort. This and previous Western Insight sessions are all available online. Yeah, you can come back in the middle of the night and watch this all over again. You don't need to bring your calculator, but you are Cookie Monsters, evidently. We'll be sending you an email very soon with a link to those sessions, some further resources from our panel, and also, of course, an invitation to give us some feedback on this session if you'd like to share any thoughts. So be sure to take a look for that in your email here shortly. We encourage you all to have a great day. Stay safe, mask up appropriately, get vaccinated if you can, and remember you and your actions are a key part of our long-term recovery effort. Have a great day.
Are we sticking around here or?